Throw in the chat, put like a yes in the chat if you can hear me. And then I know that we've got all the panelists in here. If you guys want to turn video on so folks can see and hear you and we can make sure that you are all good, that would be awesome. Hey.
Hey, Tara.
Hey.
Awesome. Oh, I can see Gabby. Nice. Some folks' videos are loading up. Can everyone see Gabby? Throw in the chat. Okay, folks can. Oh, I see lots of yeses. Okay, yep. Nice.
They seem to be jumping in and out.
All right. Looks like some technical difficulties. You always know with technology, when you have 5 video feeds about to clash, there might be some interesting things that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I literally had to restart my router like 15 minutes ago.
Oh yeah. Let's hope we can all get back on here.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah,
yes.
I can hear you.
All right. So at least we have that.
Yep.
Well, great, Gabby. Great to meet you. Actually.
Very nice to meet you too. You
yeah,
too,
Gabby.
Brent.
I don't know if we've met over video either, so it's nice to meet you as well.
And same
hey
here.
Guys.
Hi guys.
All right, so now the only person missing is Tara, so that should be great.
You're without a leader.
So what do you guys want to talk about? No, she should be back in hopefully in a second.
Where is everyone right now? Where are you guys located? I know, Emmanuel, you're in New York, right?
Actually, not right now. I'm in Paris.
Oh, you're in Paris.
Paris.
This happens today.
Well, what time is it right now?
Tara's back.
There we go.
We're good.
Better now. Okay, got it. I was talking to myself for a while there. All right, cool. I think we're all here. Okay, I'm really excited about this panel and everyone that we have here because the folks who are on this line, if you're watching and you're in the chat and you don't know who everyone is, we're gonna kind of go through. But everybody here is doing really, really groundbreaking, really awesome work in this space of building code-free apps, building apps without code. And so I want to have everyone just introduce themselves. I'm gonna have Emmanuel, because he's the first one I see, kick this off. But I'd like you to just share kind of your name and what you do and how you're part of this ecosystem. And so everyone will get kind of acquainted with who you guys are, and then we'll jump into it.
Sure, so I'll start. Great to be here. So my name is Emmanuel Straschnov, and I'm founder of Bubble. Bubble is a visual programming tool that people use to build apps without code. It's probably the most advanced tool out there right now. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this in this panel. And so it's great to be here with some familiar faces, actually, because I know some of the panelists that are very active in the Bubble community, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Yes, thank you for being here. Okay, who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
Go for it.
Hi, everybody. I'm really, really happy to be here. This is really exciting for me. My name is Gaby Roman. I run Coaching Bubble. This is the same Bubble that Emmanuel has co-founded. So I actually teach other people how to use it. I work with people every single day, building their apps and strategizing through online video calls, video courses and ebooks and all these things. So I'm here as a learning resource for the Bubble platform.
Got it. Awesome. Airdev team, you guys want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm Andrew. And I'm Vlad. We rehearsed that before. We run a company called Airdev. We're sort of the plan B behind Gaby and Brent. So if you don't want to actually learn Bubble, but you have an idea that can be tech-enabled, we'll build it for you. So we're sort of a new spin on an old idea, which is a custom software development agency, but we build primarily with no-code tools, and we have sort of a streamlined process to get you from idea to app very quickly.
Got it. And then Brent, you want to kick off?
Sure. Hey guys. So my name is Brent Summers, and I'm the founder of the CodeFree startup. And pretty much as the CodeFree space has grown, we've kind of emerged as the leading teaching solution. So we teach over 11,000 students now how to build apps like Airbnb, Uber, Tinder, everything without code. So pretty much as people like Emmanuel are building it, we're just trying to push the limits of it and break it and see like exactly what we can build with it. So yeah, really excited to talk about some of the crazy stuff that Emmanuel and everyone else is up to.
Got it. I love this. Okay, so Emmanuel's team, the Bubble team, has this quote that by 2020, most programmers won't be engineers. They'll be doctors, teachers, farmers, and executives. I love this quote because I think that it kind of shows some of the things that are starting to happen in this space and in this industry. Are you guys seeing that that's kind of continuing to be the trend? Who are the people that you guys are seeing building these kinds of products? Like, do you feel like we're on that track, or do you feel like we maybe have some more time? It's not going to actually be 2020. How do you feel about that? Emmanuel, do you want to answer since that's your first quote?
Yeah, well, that was actually something we said when we just started before we had product off the ground, which was kind of the initial vision. And the reason why I think this will happen regardless of how we do it. Bubble is basically our attempt to make it happen. The reason why this is happening, and this is a deep thing, and I'm not sure we should get too much into details there, but what's happening is that software is basically the enabler for all businesses out there. I mean, if you're a farmer, you need to understand how to improve, productivity, and most of the time that's going to involve some automation, and automation is software. And so you have two ways to do that. One way is basically to trust engineers to do it, which basically turns engineers into an elite group of the world, which is a little bit what it is today. People talk about Silicon Valley all the time about, how great or not great the product they're building, the money they're making, all these things. Or another way to do it is to basically create new tools so that everybody can do it. And so that's what we do. Now, are we on track to that by 2020? So we're talking 2 years ahead of us. I think so. I mean, it's already happening. So when I look at our user base, we already have some people that are definitely not engineers that write software using Bubble. Now, is it all farmers in the world using Bubble or using other code-free tools? Not yet. I think 2 years is a reasonable goal, not to have everyone, but to start having a significant part of the business world starting building apps by themselves for themselves, I think.
Yeah. Brent, what are you seeing in terms of who the people are that you work with that are building apps this way? Like, who are they?
Yeah, so I think the quote definitely has a lot of great sentiment behind it, and I'm definitely seeing a lot of specialized folks coming through our doors. I think what I'm seeing, which is really interesting, is a lot of people in internal teams at large companies that are super specialized. Let's say they're in the communications team and they've been bugging developers of their company for a very long time to like build something for them. And now they're going out and they're building it themselves, which is really exciting. And so I think that's happening a lot in enterprise and larger companies. And, to the, quote of farmers and other specialties that are outside of the big business world, I think that's just going to continue to expand as this becomes more and more well known. I think one of the funny things is that we're a very small community with, compared to coding and just the giant monopoly that everything is in the coding world. So it's really cool, to see as we expand how that's going to shape how other people are able to build things.
Vlad and Andrew, you guys run a agency on, with all the cool, additions to it, but, an agency, and you guys are working with, what kinds of clients are you often working with? Who are you seeing building or, kind of benefiting from being able to build this way?
Yeah, I mean, in the 2.5 years we've been doing this, we've seen a very broad spectrum of clients. we certainly see, volume-wise, we see a lot of entrepreneurs because they're all over the place, and everyone has a lot of inspiration these days to take the knowledge that they've learned and accumulated from whatever job they had before and pursue an idea to try to make that better. So we see a lot of non-technical entrepreneurs who have a great idea and want to be able to focus on other aspects aside from the technology and pursuing that. But we also see professional service firms like consulting firms who want to ditch PowerPoint slides and Excel to move up to software. We see managers within large corporations where they've got the IT team who has this 10-year roadmap that they're not going to get a piece of, and they've got some discretionary spend to throw at an app that will be very helpful to them. And so it's really, really a wide range of folks who come to chat with us.
And I guess the other thing to add is the trajectory has been going in the direction of these more and more sophisticated clients where, when we got into Bubble, we were the non-technical entrepreneurs, and we were just tinkerers and trying to build something. And now we do have, companies with larger budgets that are approaching us. So the trajectory is up.
So I want to back up a little bit and just hear more about everyone's backgrounds, because I'm pretty sure it was not the plan for everyone to be building apps without code. Like, that was not on the agenda for most of us. And so, Emmanuel, I want to start with you. How long have you been building Bubble, first of all, but what were you doing before that?
We've been on Bubble for more than 6 years now. So initially, what I was doing before, even though I did math and CS in college, I was actually a management consultant before business school, working in China. So I lived in China and Asia, Japan as well for almost 5 years, so quite a while. And then I went to business school, and while at business school, I started thinking about various things I could do. Wanted to start a company and got introduced to Josh Has, who actually started Bubble a little bit before me, like 3 months ahead. At that time, it wasn't called Bubble. It was not even incorporated, but the initial idea was there. And so it's been 6 years. We had a fairly conservative approach in terms of fundraising. In other words, we haven't raised any money, which made us be the two of us for quite some while until basically last year. And we started scaling the team fairly aggressively middle of last year. So we went from 2 to 6, and now we're looking for a 7th person, actually. So this has been exciting, but it's been 6 years. So it's been a long journey. I would say building something like...
2 people? Is that what you're saying?
Say that again?
You built Bubble until last year with 2 people, is what you're telling me.
Right. Yes. We can always argue whether we could have been faster by hiring more people. I'm not even sure, to be honest, for a lot of reasons. But building a product like Bubble is something that takes time. And I think it doesn't necessarily fit the VC model very well, because what I would describe as an MVP for Bubble basically lets people build their own MVPs. And to do that, you need to have a pretty damn good technology, because you need the product to be fast, white label, let people do whatever they want. So an MVP for us basically means not perfection, but something close to it, which took us, we think, between 3 years and a half and 4 years to get there. Yeah. And we started our commercial launch, I would say, like public launch, October 2015. So actually more than 3 years in.
Got it. So Gaby, what about you? What were you doing before you launched Coaching Bubble?
Sorry if you guys are hearing a dog barking. My background's in video post-production, actually. So I was a video editor for a very long time. I was working in New York just editing commercials. And I had several years ago this idea to build an app of my own. It was one of those things that kept me up at night, had to be built, but I have no idea even where to begin, let alone run a business surrounding it. So I did the first thing I Googled, what do I do? I want to build an app. What do I do? Oh, I got to hire some people. I have to have them build it for me. Ended up spending a lot of money to end up with some Photoshop files and a working sign up screen. And that was about it. So I was like, this is not going to work. I need to find some kind of something codeless that I can do, take command over myself. And Bubble changed my life. I found it, and I mean, I picked it up really quickly just because I needed to get this thing built. And excuse me. And it was, I mean, it was just everything lined up exactly for what I needed to build. Bubble was the exact right tool for it. And I became super active in the community forum because I was learning too. And I was answering other people's questions. It was helping me learn more. I was, just building my knowledge. It turned into just this natural thing where people were then coming to me like, oh, you did this. Hey, maybe you can help me. Oh, let's get on a Skype call. Oh, okay. Now it kind of just snowballed into this hub of education that I created just because I thought it was needed. I thought there needed to be some more, help documents and videos and stuff like that. So it definitely was not the plan, but I love teaching people. I love it so much. I love talking to people and working with them and hearing their ideas and helping them and stuff like that. So it turned out really great.
Yeah. Brent, what about you? What were you doing before CodeFree startup?
Yeah, so I always say that my foray into the CodeFree development community started because I was a pretty terrible developer. I I tried coding probably as soon as I entered the startup space. I was the first sales hire at a high growth startup, VC funded, and was with them for a few years, grew the company. We really had an amazing thing going and built a great product, but I got super burnt out. And so I was trying to figure out my next thing. And I was doing some consulting at the time and was trying to build my own apps, trying to learn JavaScript development, Ruby on Rails for a short term when that was the big thing. And I was just found it super, super difficult. So I'd say around the time I was starting to consult more and more first-time entrepreneurs was when I really got hooked into the CodeFree world because I put out a email course called Don't Learn How to Code that just tended to do really well, and a lot of people liked it. And really, there was nothing about CodeFree tools in there. It just was about how to talk to developers so that you didn't have to do it yourself. And then I had a bunch of people suddenly in my inbox like, okay, well, now I need to build something. What do I do? So that's where I was, that kind of led me on that journey where I found Bubble, found all these other amazing tools, and realized that, this isn't like, what it used to be where you would plug one thing into Google Sheets and maybe that would be your code-free hack around. Now you can actually build full-fledged apps like Airbnb with Bubble. And I think, the first time I built Airbnb with Bubble was kind of that awakening. And I was like, oh, this is the game changer right here. And so, that's what got me to today.
Vlad and Andrew, what about you guys? What were you doing before this? I know a little bit about this answer. And also, Vlad and Andrew were the people who introduced me to Bubble and taught me how to use Bubble. So share with us, what were you guys doing before you discovered all this stuff?
Not much, just kind of sitting around.
Just hanging out.
Oh, yeah, right.
So we came across Bubble in 2013, which now is a long time ago. It just so happened we were going to school at the same place that Emmanuel had gone a couple years before, and each of us were working on our own separate startup ideas, which is, I think, a pretty common theme in the Bubble and no-code world. Is you join it by necessity because you have to solve a problem you're working on, and then you end up liking it and staying for a while. So each of us were working on these different startup ideas. I think Emmanuel got himself into one of our many, listservs that go around the student body. And this one said, if you're trying to start a technical product and you don't know how to code, you can use this tool, and the Bubble founders are coming to campus. So I happened to spot this announcement in the bottom of an email, and I went to see these guys when they came to campus, and I was the only person there. And it turns out I was the only person sort of, gullible enough to believe that this tool could actually do what it promised to do, because there were a lot of other tools before it that have promised to usher in this world of, post code. And I was, as gullible as I was lucky as well that they actually did deliver on it. And so pretty early on, I started using that early form of Bubble to build my own startup. I had one false start because there wasn't enough functionality yet. And then they came back a couple months later and said, we've added that functionality. And that was actually important as well, because it showed that as many other disruptive technologies, as is the story with them, they start out as very minimal in terms of their capabilities, right? They can do something much, much cheaper and faster than the alternative of code, but they don't have as many features, or they have lots of limitations. But the rate at which they overcome those limitations far exceeds the pace at which people are demanding new things. And so in short, they catch up, and Bubble has caught up over the past 5 years to the point where, you want responsive design, you want APIs connecting to anything, you want really any functionality that you would demand from a modern application you can do. So, I mean, that's a little bit of a preview, but long story short, Vlad and I both were working on different startups. We built them using Bubble. We thought, holy cow, we've turned ourselves into full stack developers from having no coding experience beyond like some, Excel Visual Basic or TI-83 calculator programming before. And so we thought, let's just keep dabbling this. And so we were both sort of freelancers in our off time for a little while, and then decided we should make something of it.
So I want to make sure I've got this right. You guys were at school, and were both of you guys, both Andrew and Vlad, were at school together, correct?
Yep, that's right, yeah.
And where were you guys? Was this grad school?
Yes, we were getting our MBAs. We were section mates, so we were friends first and accomplices later.
Got it. So you're at Harvard, right? At HBS, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're at Harvard Business School. This guy, Emmanuel, who's an alumni, comes and kind of sends an email and says, I'm going to do this workshop. You come, you're the only one there. And you learn about Bubble, you start building on this. It's really awesome. Really awesome story. I think like a lot of people like to hear kind of some of these early origin stories about, Bubble not having all the things that you needed at once and them catching up, because I think it gives them some clarity and kind of what happens next for them and how their process works. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I know you talk about, hacking it and piecing things together. And I mean, out of necessity, that's what you do a lot of times when you don't have the skills or the funds, and then you can work that into something cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I met you guys when I was stringing things together with Zapier and a bunch of different tools. And so I went to a workshop, similarly, a workshop at Berkeley that you guys ran, and learned all the things that you guys are putting together, and realized that I could be using Bubble instead of just stringing everything together. And I was starting to outgrow all of that stringing anyway. And so it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think you built Facebook that weekend, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Don't tell Mark.
So what would you guys say are your 3 favorite tools? We're talking a lot about Bubble, but over this past week at the conference, we've been talking about lots of other tools, because depending on what you're trying to accomplish, there may be another CodeFree tool that you want to use in conjunction with Bubble. Like, there are lots of tools out there that are available. So what would you guys say? I think Emmanuel won't be too offended. What are the 3 favorite tools that you guys are using to build things? Gaby, I'll have you go first.
Yeah, obviously Bubble's like my number one tool, but Zapier is probably something that I use every single day too, personally, and also just something that I recommend to people when they're building their apps without code to check out, because the name of the game with Zapier is automation. And what I'm seeing is people are wanting to build apps that automate businesses, automate, these new ideas that their ideas are about, like streamlining existing processes. So Zapier is fantastic for that. I think they just hit their 1,000 plus web services that they're connected to. So it's really amazing. I mean, you can do so much with it, and you don't need to know a single line of code. It's amazing. So I highly recommend that one. Shitsu is one that I'm keeping my eye on. I don't know if you guys have heard about this one. Some people have been integrating it with Bubble too, but it's a Google spreadsheet tool that allows you to power your applications with your Google spreadsheet. But again, you don't need to know any code to do it. It's very easy. And they've got a lot of features that they're adding onto it too to help create a CMS with your spreadsheet. So that's something that I would keep my eye on, because they've grown their features a lot in the past few months too. And then I think this might not be a tool, but more of a resource. I like to always recommend Google's material design guidelines, because style is still really important, and design, your UX, the experience that the users have when they're interacting with your app is still super important. And if you're coming to building an application without any kind of design background, you don't know CSS or anything like that, the material design guidelines are really great to get you off on the right foot, because that style guide, that palette is everywhere. It's something that people are comfortable with because they see it in all of Google's products. And you can look it up online. It's just like a document that breaks down the entire, all of the guidelines by component, by like the colors and all of that. And it's very helpful for just having like a little bit of hand holding for how to design something. Not necessarily for building something, but I think it's just as important.
Yeah, I mean, how do you spell Shih Tzu? Folks in the chat are trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's sheet, like spreadsheet, and then SU. I'll type it in here.
Okay, got it. Okay, great. So Bubble, Zapier, Shih Tzu, and then you also are using material design framework. Yeah. Folks are asking how to spell Shih Tzu. Yeah, we've got it in the chat. And then also, you guys, this morning, Wade Foster, who's the CEO of Zapier, came and shared his story about building his product and his trajectory. Was really good. So Brent, what about you? What are your 3 favorite tools?
Yeah, so without offending Emmanuel, I think he will be grateful. The reason why I'm recommending tools other than Bubble is because of how advanced Bubble has become at this point. So like you said, Tara, at a certain point you outgrew Zapier and those other workflows, but you already had your business validated, which is super crucial and critical. And so students that have not yet validated their ideas, they come to me and they ask like, hey, should I get started with Bubble? And I say, hey, maybe not quite yet, because Bubble can build everything. And you do have to know things about design and app building and deployment, all that good stuff before you build with Bubble. So a couple tools I like that are a little bit more simple to get your idea validated. Probably my favorite general purpose is Typeform. What's super simple about Typeform is that you can make a page that can collect everything from payments. You can validate ideas. You can connect to Zapier and those other services. You can have the appearance of a big, very thriving business that's really just a page and a payment collection form. And then if you want to build an app that's more specific, like a marketplace, ShareTribe is a great marketplace builder, and something I recommend for students that want to build something a little bit more complex, but again, they don't have to recreate the wheel or build something that's really, really difficult and takes a ton of time. So I'd recommend anything that can save you a ton of time when it gets to the validation stage. The one thing I tell a lot of students is to avoid spinning their wheels building something that they don't have any users for yet. They have no validation, so validate first and then stick with Bubble, and Bubble will carry you through the rest of the way.
Yeah. Emmanuel, what else are you interested in the space? Like, who are the companies and the folks where you kind of tip your hat to and you're really interested in what they're building?
Yeah, well, I think my perspective is a little bit different from other people in this panel, because I'm more looking at all the tools as kind of the competitive landscape. One thing that we haven't had time to focus on is building native applications. Yeah. There are some tools out there that start being there, like DropSource is one of them, for instance, which, to be honest, I haven't played too much with it. However, we did a little bit of work so that people that use DropSource can use us as a backend. So we actually, which is something, it's a general thing about our philosophy, which is to try to be as open as possible to the outside world. We created an API for that, sometimes getting a little bit into the coding space, like letting people add features with code if they want to. So I've been following a little bit that. Then other things that I've been following are more like, actually JavaScript frameworks, things that I see as a long-term competition, because some people think that coding should be visual. Some people think that we should just have easier frameworks that are easier to use and that everybody should be coding. I think it's a mistake. It's obviously not our vision, but I've been following that a little bit. But I don't think these kind of tools will be relevant to a lot of our users. I think there is a similar vision down the line, though, that everybody should be able to build software.
Yeah, absolutely. Vlad and Andrew, what about you guys? 3 favorite tools that you're using out there?
I think all the tools named so far. The only one to add, perhaps, is to Emmanuel's point for mobile apps. There are just not many options right now. But one that we have found that works reasonably well is called GoNative, which is gonative.io. They're pretty expensive, but they do allow you to create iOS and Android apps out of web apps, which you can build on Bubble or somewhere else. And then the way you create the mobile apps is it just puts a native wrapper around it, and inside is still the web app. And so that can get you some mobile stuff like push notifications, and users can download that from the App Store and things like that. Yeah.
Got it. So that's what you're using now. What would you guys like to see, just like in an ideal world, what would you like to see happen next in the world of being able to build an app without code? Emmanuel kind of hinted on some of this a little bit. But like Brent, for you, for example, what would you like to see next?
Yeah, so Emmanuel brought up a good point, and I'm also studying some of these JavaScript frameworks closely, like React and React Native, because we're getting to a point where there's almost this collision where on one side you have Bubble that's pushing the boundaries of visual programming, and then JavaScript, React stacks that are starting to make coding easier and easier. So I think really what you want to get at in the future is a tool that can most easily allow someone to express themselves in whatever that way they want through a visual editor that then combines really powerful coding. And really at this point, the only downside of any sort of visual solution is just there's just some limits, just a bit. But really, I think what Emmanuel's doing a really great job at is just kind of smashing down those walls. Like Andrew said earlier, like, hey, you need API connections. Here's API connections. And I'm sure, mobile apps is the next thing to be tackled and all that good stuff. So yeah, really what it comes down to is there are these two worlds. The traditional coding world that's working on making things easier and easier, and then the visual coding, no code world that's working on making their solutions more and more powerful, more and more customizable. So it's really, if those are going to meet in the middle, or if one is going to get there first, yeah, that's really just kind of what we're all looking at this point.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really great way to kind of paint what's happening in the ecosystem, right? Because both sides are changing and kind of meeting each other halfway. That makes a lot of sense. Gaby, what would you say for you are the things you would like to see happen next? That could be like a feature that you'd like to see available, or just kind of a larger thing.
Yeah, I have kind of more of a larger big picture thought for what I'd like to see in the future. And that's for this world of building apps without code to enter classrooms a little bit more. If we can get, what I would have given to graduate from college, or even high school for that matter, having some hands-on experience building an app without code, just kind of getting my ideas out there and actually seeing something work. But just in general, like introducing this more in schools, in like workshop settings, lab settings. I think I read on the community forum on Bubble, someone had led some kind of a workshop with 12-year-olds. And it went well. Like they just kind of played around with it. And I think that's so awesome. And I think if there can be more of that, the ideas will just happen a lot faster and more people will get into, I think, just spreading the word, and the younger minds especially would be great.
The 12-year-olds probably picked it up faster than all of us, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to grab a couple questions that are coming through in the chat and throw them you guys' way. So let's see what we've got here. There are a couple questions about kind of the future of intellectual property rights and how maintaining your rights to whatever you've built on the platform currently works and how it will work. I'm going to kick off and have a couple of you guys answer this, but Vlad and Andrew, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think there are probably already parallels to this out in the world right now where, Salesforce is a perfect example of something that lots of people are building on. And if you build on Salesforce, you own everything that you're building. You own your data, you own the logic, but you don't own Salesforce. And so I think that's the similar kind of model that we'll see emerge more and more where on Bubble, it's the same thing right now. Your app is yours, your data is yours, but you don't own Bubble.
For those who don't know, what do you mean by build on Salesforce? How does that work? What does that mean?
It's it's a very similar concept where they give you a framework that's also largely visual. There's some code that's involved, but largely it's visual. And then you build in this case, a customer relationship management tool using that framework. And you build that tool to do whatever you want it to do, to manage all kinds of clients and do all the workflows that you needed to do. And you really design it to be just for yourself. And so you own that.
And by the way, if you want to back up a little further and get a little bit less technical, it's the same concept as, Microsoft PowerPoint or Excel or Word docs, right? I mean, those are pieces of software that allow you to program a document using their framework, and you save it as a docx, and you're inside their world, but you obviously own the contents of your document that you've created. So
yeah. Emmanuel, do you get a lot of questions about this? How do you guys think about this on your Bubble team?
I mean, exactly like as Andrew explained them. And I mean, our terms are very clear about that, our FAQ as well. And to be honest, like the Microsoft Office analogy is usually the one we use. We actually don't get that question as often as you think. So, I mean, it's important, and it's definitely something we address in our terms. We usually get a question like maybe once a month like that. It's pretty rare given the traffic we have. And honestly, we have an easy answer. I mean, the easy answer is exactly what Vlad said. You own your application, you own the workflows, the design, you own the data that it creates, provided you have those terms with your own users. We own the code that runs it. That's it.
Uh-oh, we're frozen.
Yeah, I think maybe just Tara's frozen.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I could react on, I mean, waiting for her to come back, about the 12-year-old kids. It's actually something we've always been trying to push that. The problem is we are for-profit, as most businesses, and we haven't raised any money, and setting up programs with school is something costly because schools don't pay too much. So what we're seeing right now, we actually see pretty regularly a spike in our analytics in one location. When you see that in Google Analytics, actually it's very visible. And then when we look at the analytics, we see that, 50 people signed up with the same something.edu email. It's always a high school, basically, or a college, but more often, interestingly enough, high school. It's something I would love to keep pushing. So we actually started with, I mean, really in the first weeks, I was already thinking that we should be going after high schools. I think it's a very interesting thing to do. And I think there is a real opportunity to come after Scratch, because MIT Scratch is cool, but it's really for like primary school kids. I think after 12, it's a little bit boring to have a character move on a screen. And also Bubble is kind of the good side of programming without the bad side, which is the code, because coding can be frustrating. Bubble can be frustrating as well, but not because a comma is missing, more because you miss something in the logic. So I think there would be a great educational value for schools. I mean, actually, incidentally, while I was in Paris, I'm still in Paris, I was meeting with people at the Ministry of Education to do a pilot here. So that's something we're going to keep pushing more as a pet project, because it's not, again, something we can be making money with for some time. I would love, and since, we were talking about the community and the network of partners, I mean, we don't use the word partners anymore, but the network of like contributors in our ecosystem that we've talked about. If people really want to start, doing this, like building content and building coursework and start, sending it to school, that would be fantastic, honestly. This is one of the best. I actually ran one of the questions in the Q&A, which was like, how can we help, propagate the vision? Well, that would be a fantastic way to do it. Right. There is some work. You need people that are familiar with education with children. Like, it's not as simple as, putting together a tutorial for like, entrepreneurs that are struggling and to start a product. You need to think about it a little bit more carefully for kids, but there is a great opportunity there. And if someone wants to do that, please reach out. I'd love to talk to them.
Yeah, I've been approached by a number of people who are like, I have a team of students, or even just they have like their own development firms with traditional coding that they're doing, but they kind of want to section them off and have them learn these other tools just to see what happens and, try to iterate on their projects a little bit faster. But I've seen so much interest in like team learning, group learning, classroom setting type of thing. I think it would be great if that could become a thing.
Do you think that, and there's a couple questions in the chat kind of around this same theme. Do you think that we are at risk, and I'll just say the industry as a whole is at risk of the code-free solutions turning into just another coding language, right? There's kind of a fine line where if you have to kind of learn, if there's a high learning curve to learning any product that's out there, right? There are a lot of products out there with higher learning curves than the ones we're talking about. So if there's a high learning curve to a product out there, at some point, does it almost become just another coding language? Are we at risk of that? Or are we kind of far away from that happening?
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in because I hear that fairly often.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
Say, I mean, I don't totally understand, to be honest, this concern as long as the tool is easy enough to learn. Like at the end of the day, one thing I will never say that you don't need to learn Bubble, because if you don't need to learn it, that means it doesn't do anything. So that's one thing. So there will always be some learning. Now, we estimate, and the other people on the panel will probably be more qualified than me to say how long it takes. I think to start getting the first grasp, to start building like a simple app, it's probably like 5 hours or something. Now, it could become 2. But at the end of the day, there will be a learning curve. And as soon as your learning curve, yes, some people, naysayers, will come in and say it's a different coding. But it's a coding that is easy and accessible. I mean, effectively, it's not a coding, it's a programming system. And this is the same, for Microsoft Office. We forgot that Microsoft Office, Microsoft Excel in particular, requires some learning. And a lot of people have done that, and now they do that in the business business world, and it's totally fine. So yes, it creates a new skill that you have to learn, but the cost to get in is probably literally like 5% of coding, and that's what is great about it. Our point here is not to try to create something that you don't need to learn. That has already been done. This is called Wix, and Wix is great for what it is, but it's not what we're talking about here. You see what I mean?
Got it. What are you guys finding in terms of, and we can talk about Bubble or other tools as well, just some of the more advanced tools that you're seeing out there. Are you finding kind of what the learning curves look like, particularly for those of you, for Gaby and Brent, who are teaching people these things and how to use these tools? What do you find that the learning curves are? And do you hear people say that thing about it becoming kind of like code, or do you not hear that very much at all, like Emmanuel was saying?
Yeah, I'd say, especially when it comes to the applications that combine no coding with coding, a good example being DropSource, as was mentioned, is one of the native app builders. One of the big things that I'm seeing with students is there's a massive amount of overwhelm because you're in this world of no coding, and then all of a sudden you get to something that requires JavaScript. So then you go to Code School, Code Academy, and you try to watch a tutorial, and then you realize, wait a minute, I just need to know this one thing, and all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed by this syntax. And so one of the things that makes Bubble so powerful is that even when you are just learning Bubble and you're taking that 5 hours, if you come away with your Bubble skills, you're also coming away with programming skills. And those programming skills are now logic-based. You now understand how an app can talk to a database. And so those are things that you can use in any framework and take them, wherever you go. So I think that's super powerful. And if you then go and try another syntax or another language, then you'll quickly find that the amount of time to learn those things is significantly higher, and there's really no guarantee that those solutions will be around as well. Good example is I know a lot of people who spent a ton of time with the JavaScript framework Meteor. That was supposed to be the next big thing in JavaScript development a couple years ago. And as the project stagnated and as Facebook launched React and React became super popular, everyone who was forced to learn the ins and outs of Meteor kind of had to jump ship and, now another syntax, now we have to learn React. So, I think this is just how the industry is going to advance. And, there's always going to be some learning required, and that learning is a good thing. I'm a big fan of learning.
What would you guys say? I'm going to start with Brent because you were just answering this question. What's one of the coolest success stories that you've seen of an entrepreneur kind of building their company, or it doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, it could be a company too, like anybody out there building something without code? what has been one of the coolest success stories you've heard?
Yeah, so the success stories that really capture my attention are the people that are outside of Silicon Valley, who have absolutely no relation to the venture capital world. They are just trying to break in. They have no coding skills, and so I actually just did a big interview with a couple students that managed to get into Y Combinator just I believe it was this past summer's batch. And they were a couple guys just, I believe in Nashville, Tennessee. They were working on an application. They had it stitched together with a couple things, maybe Zapier or Google Sheets, and in a front end. Then they found Bubble, which was able to take them to V2. And they just constantly iterated. They kept pushing and pushing, and then eventually got the attention of the venture capital industry as soon as they got into Y Combinator. And that's just amazing to see, because I think it goes to show that the solutions are really what speaks. And even if that solution is built without code, if it's built by someone who isn't your traditional app developer who's coming out of Facebook or Google, that's really the most powerful thing. As long as the solution speaks and you're solving good problems, you can get into Silicon Valley. And as Emmanuel has proven with Bubble, sometimes you don't even need Silicon Valley, because you can just bootstrap a company, and as long as you're solving a problem, then people will happily pay for it.
Yeah. Gaby, what about you? Have you heard any really cool stories of things? And it can be big or small, folks building interesting things.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that jump out at me is this guy that I worked with last year, who in the same group that Brent was describing, just completely removed from Silicon Valley, not at all with any kind of business background whatsoever or coding in any way. He was very dedicated to his idea, which was like an on-demand food truck, food delivery service. And so there's this physical aspect of like the food truck and making the food and delivering it. But half of the equation was this app, where that's how they notified their users that the truck was there and they could place their order on the app. It was a really cool idea. And he built his MVP for the app on Bubble in about a month. I mean, it must have been like 3.5 weeks. And he went out and tested it in his location. I think he was in Florida, just some small community with a handful of people. It went really well. He got a lot of great feedback, and he learned a lot. And I think within 6 months, he was a finalist for this American Entrepreneurship Award. I mean, from no app, zero, to being recognized for these achievements in something that like you just learned in 6 months how to do, and you're doing well at it. And it was all, I mean, the app was really like the central thing. And he did a really good job. I mean, he did have a lot of focus, a lot of drive, and he was very organized about it. He had his core features and no bells and whistles or anything like that. Was very kind of, focused on what he needed to do to get his users. But that was incredible to see. And he's doing really well now. I mean, he's validating new features and stuff like that. And I was just very proud and impressed by how quickly he was able to achieve so much there.
Got it. Very nice. What about Andrew and Vlad? I think some of you guys, you maybe can provide even some other examples of not just entrepreneurs as well. What are some interesting things you're seeing? You can give a specific example.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are maybe two categories of cool examples for us. One is sort of like Brent mentioned, teams that use no-code tools and get recognition from the establishment and are able to, raise money in Silicon Valley. And so we just had a client called Impuesto Correcto that was out of Colombia, creating TurboTax for Colombia. And they got into Y Combinator with their Bubble built app. So that type of thing is great validation. In fact, the first client we ever had, which was during the freelancer days, was a startup that was based here in here in San Francisco, and they started building on Bubble because they had a bad experience with some outsourced developers previously, and they've raised over $100 million now, and half of their company is built using the Bubble platform, and the other half using Salesforce, and they integrate. And so those types of establishment examples are pretty cool. But the other type, which is I think equally fun, is folks who just build their application to solve a need and then just run it. And they don't actually need to have that validation of raising X money from Y and, getting these people on board. We had one of our very early clients 2.5 years ago now build an Airbnb platform for office space for psychiatrists. So it's like, I guess you need a couch in the room and you rent out your space. And she contacted us again like 2 years later and was like, hey, I think I need a new feature now. And we hadn't talked to her in so long, we assumed, a lot of ideas come and go. But no, she's sitting there running her business and booking out rooms. And that type of thing is really cool too, because it's not just a different way to get to the same outcome of sort of joining the fast lane of, VC funded rocket ships, but it's just a different way to run a business. And I think it'll be cool to see more of those types of businesses take a totally different type of path, like Bubble themselves are practicing what they preach. And
like you, Tara, I mean, you have a couple examples yourself that follow that second path.
Our favorite successful no-code entrepreneur.
Thank you. I mean, the thing is that you often don't hear very much. Like Emmanuel, I think, can kind of tell you this. We know about Bubble and we know about his success, but the companies that are maybe doing, their own revenue, they're not trying to take the VC path, right? You don't hear about them in all the TechCrunch articles. And so it's far less sexy. And they're probably at the end of the day kind of making a lot more of the money and kind of building more sustainable businesses, but you don't hear much about them. Emmanuel, for you, since you run a company like that, right, you could easily go and raise venture money and just go a very different trajectory. Do you feel some back and forth tension that's maybe something you should do because then you'll kind of blow up and be in all the news articles? How do you tackle that? Because I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's a route that they feel like they should go.
I mean, honestly, raising money is a much deeper change than just something that gets you on the map. I think we're already on the map without that now. I mean, for some time, people might see that the fact that we didn't raise money was something worrisome. I think today we have the scale that people know that if we wanted to raise money, we could. And so that makes the conversation much easier. Now, the question about raising money, because that's kind of a little bit what you're asking. Honestly, right now, we don't have any plan like that. We're not planning on raising money. I think we're currently making enough money organically to start scaling the team. If at some point, because of either a change in the competitive landscape or we turn into a mode where clearly investing $1 brings $2, then it's an arbitrage to raise money, and then you do it. Right now, we're not there. Will it happen? Maybe. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't foresee it for 2018. We'll see. I mean, we actually had quite some interest last year from investors. And then we thought about it, and we were like, if we had like $10 million in the bank account, I'm not exactly sure how that would change right now the business, because at that time we hadn't started scaling the team. Honestly, if you take $10 million and it's just two guys, that can go wrong pretty quickly. So it can be pretty easy to spend money in not a very smart and optimal way. As we grow, if we start feeling that we'll capital limited, then we'll think about it. In terms of press, I mean, it's definitely something we've been working on right now. I mean, we need more people to know about us. I think right now, the size of our community, the product quality are clearly way above our coverage. Like, our coverage is not as good as what it could be, which has some advantages in some ways. I think the mistake of a lot of startups is to get coverage too soon, where they have to basically say they do things in the news that they actually don't do it, which is the best way to disappoint people. And when you disappoint people and you lose them, then you lost them because they're not coming back. So you have to be pretty careful. Today, I would be very comfortable getting all over the news. Now, what I'm seeing right now, as we start talking with people, is that the bootstrapping angle actually works pretty well. There is an interesting current right now with this idea, Silicon Valley, start people criticizing, big companies, smaller companies, there's too much money going on. Not raising money is a great way to say that you're not part of it, because effectively you didn't touch, that horrible thing that Silicon Valley has, which is money. And it's good not to have that. And there is something about, there is a case to be said about building a business like people used to build it 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, and 20 years ago, which means without external capital and just, selling something that people buy, then they pay, then you invest the money you're making. So right now, yeah, if we had a round to announce, we would be in the news, but that would be honestly for 2 days, and then people forget you. I think what we have right now is something that is more sustainable. We have a story that starts being pretty powerful. We certainly can do much better. I mean, we're working on this. This is something we've never been, in a mode trying to get visible as much as we can. In fact, our motto for the first 3 years was let's stay hidden, because we are not in a position to actually deliver what we would say in the news. Because, reporters want to fight kind of catchy things. And at that time, the mission was catchy. The product was not at the level. Now it is. So we need to change a little bit the way we do things to be more visible. It's something that will happen over time. But fundraising is not going to be the way to get there right now.
Yeah, I just want to point out for the audience and kind of recap as well that one of the really awesome trends of this week thus far at this conference is that you have heard lots of really awesome executives share with you a different side than you very often hear about raising money and how they're deciding to grow their company, right? Craig Newmark sharing, why he didn't raise any money, or Wade Foster from Zapier sharing how he raised $1 million and put it in the bank account and only spent $100K of it, right? These are very different stories. Emmanuel sharing kind of some of his decisions and how he's going about things. We don't often hear this narrative. And so I think it's really awesome to kind of have this community of people who are thinking about things kind of differently. So I'm going to ask you guys I'm asking two more questions. One question in the conversation is around security and how, as we think about just using all the different platforms that are out there, from Wix and Typeform all the way to Bubble, how do you guys think about it? What are the questions that you get when it comes to security, and how do you answer them? Brent, what about you? Like, when people ask you, as I build this app, are things going to be secure? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think this question is pretty closely related to the topic we just discussed a short while ago about, is my data, and is it safe?
Yeah, we're talking about property.
Yeah, exactly. And they tend to be, pretty similar things. And the way that I look at it, all of the companies that are being built in the no-code space, they're really trying their best to develop secure applications. And if you're dealing with any startup, there's going to be some situations. I know, having been part of a startup before, it's like, do we value security here, or do we value growth? And so I actually think that if you're dealing with a company that is not raising venture capital, in some cases you might be safer off, because I know, having been in one of those venture capital backed companies, that sometimes we did place growth over security. But yeah, I mean overall, it really depends what the kind of information you're keeping on your database is. Is it government secrets that your users are trying to keep safe? If so, that better be your main focus. If it is profile information and photos of someone's cat, that should definitely be your focus to keep that secure as well, because it's user privacy and it's something that they expect. But at the end of the day, this is really up to the app creators. And if you go to a site like Bubble and sign up, you can totally read about how they're handling security and how sites are encrypted and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Emmanuel, for you, but when you guys get this question, how do you answer it when you're talking about security?
So obviously we try, to find all holes in our system. I don't think we have any hole right now, but if people find them, they should report them immediately, like security@bubble.is, and that's the first thing we'll fix. What Brent just said is actually very true. So the way we would see security in our system, if you build an app, as soon as it starts being complex enough, you need to start thinking about who should see what type of data. Like, that's what we call in our system privacy rules. This is something that requires a little bit of education. So that's our job, is to build a system to define those rules. That's done. Now we can probably do a better job at explaining people how to build that. At some point, that's part of the whole learning Bubble thing. I would say this is extremely important, but this is important once you've already kind of like a professional Bubble user, because until you have data in your app, there's not much security issues yet.
No one even knows who you are.
Right, but there will be at some point. And as you get better, then you start defining those privacy rules. Basically, how it works in Bubble is you're going to say, if the user has this kind of connection with that thing, he can see it, otherwise he cannot see it. And this can be fairly complex at times. This is something you do without code. but it's something you still need to think about carefully and do. So what we tell our users is really, and in fact, we have a few warnings as soon as they start using some features that expose data to the outside world, such as the API. We have a pop-up that tells them, hey, are you aware that now everybody who's somewhat of a hacker, but not like a top hacker, can read your data? So add what is needed so that doesn't happen. So that part is on the user, and and on our end, security also involves reliability. That's a question we hear often. How can you guarantee you're reliable? What I can say that we probably 70% of our development time right now is around performance and reliability more than anything else. It's our commitment. To be honest, it's a very challenging job. I mean, we're now beyond 10 million page views every month on Bubble apps. Like last year, that was probably 1/10 of that. So that comes with some challenges just to be reliable and work at scale. But I mean, that's why we're here for. So we have to do it. But what I can say, I mean, we can certainly do better there. There is a lot of room for improvement, and Bubble is not as fast as I'd like it to be. But that's our main focus right now, because we know that probably is the first thing that will keep people on Bubble in the future, and we want them to stay on Bubble and grow with us.
Got it. Okay, so to close out, I want to have everyone just share one piece of advice that you have for non-technical entrepreneurs who are going out and building their company, or even that want to be entrepreneurs inside of their own companies and maybe kind of bring some new ideas to the table. What's one piece of advice? I'm going to have Gaby start. One piece of advice that you have for folks as they're building and creating their company.
Yeah, I think whether you're building an app without code or with code, it's building an app is kind of half of building a business. You've built the app, but hey, you still got to market it. You still have a business model to think about. You have to get your users. You have to retain your users. So getting an app built without code, that's great. Good job. But you're not there yet. So just understanding that when you're entering this space, you are building a business, you're creating a business. So you have to go in there with that mindset. And being an app builder as well, you also kind of have to wear the developer hat and be organized in the way that you build your app so that you're building it efficiently, so that you're not creating these security or privacy holes, and just kind of taking care of everything, just kind of going slow, a step at a time. A lot of people think, I'm building an app without code. I found a shortcut to getting my business up and running super fast with very little money. You are saving time and money, but there's a lot of other things that you need to think about and go into it just kind of with a business mindset and a developer mindset in those traditional, attitudes too.
So Gaby's advice is wear both of your hats, not just one, right? Got it. Yeah. Got it. What about Andrew and Vlad? Do you guys have one piece of advice you would give for folks?
Yeah, I guess first, just seconding that notion and saying, just because you can build it doesn't mean that you should. And I'd say that in two ways. One is, both Vlad and I, the way that we got started in this business was trying to start a different business, getting really swept up in how cool it was to make our apps. And in any given hour that we had free, it wasn't go out and market our business or go out and, redo the finances. It was build another feature on Bubble. Now, when you're building features for an empty room, that doesn't a business make, right? So you want to think of, what's the minimum I need to build in order to get to the other parts of running a successful business. And so for some people, that's none of it. Like, have somebody else who's already climbed whatever learning curve they need to build it for you. For some people, it's building the minimum piece. And for other people like us, it ended up being spending all of our time doing what we love, which is building, by making a different business out of it. So I think that's really important, what Gaby was saying about, the technical side and the other hats of your business, and just picking a place where you feel comfortable.
And so as a parallel and as somewhat of a contrast to it, I would say just start, just do something. It might be overwhelming to go in and you don't know where to start and what to figure out, but just start doing it, and then step by step you figure it out and you learn stuff, and then you'll end up with something. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad, but you'll learn a bunch of stuff in the process.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Nice. Emmanuel, what about you? Piece of advice for folks.
Yeah, something very much. Bake your product a lot. Be very product centric and user centric, which doesn't mean try to get as much publicity as possible as early as possible because that usually doesn't end well. But get users as early as you can and keep improving the product until you know it works, and then go full scale.
Yeah, awesome. Brent, what about you?
Yeah, so I know we've talked a lot about solutions today, and so I can already see a lot of people watching going to Bubble or Zapier and just typing away. But in relation to Andrew's point, I'd say that the sexy thing is building the product, but the not so sexy thing is focusing on the problem that you're solving. And so starting with the problem is probably the piece of advice I'd recommend for all non-technical entrepreneurs. Actually go out and talk to the people that you're trying to solve this problem for is super, super important. I always tell students to get on the phone with people that they're solving this problem for. If it's them, if they're solving the problem for them, scratching your own itch is a great place to start. That's how I got started building software in the first place. It was like, hey, I really need an app to figure this out. And then I built it. And then one of the benefits about scratching your own itch is that you can go talk to people who have the same issue that you do, and then figure out how to best market to them, how to best build for them. So I'd say, yeah, again, just getting away from just building to build, and instead kind of diving deeper and deeper into the problem that you're solving, and realizing that you're solving this problem and the app is just a way to solve that problem.
I love this. You guys just dropped some good nuggets. People are quoting you guys in the chat and on Twitter. I love this. Well, I want to thank you all so much for hanging out with us, for sharing your stories, for sharing a lot of your wisdom. A lot of people were asking about some of the resources that you guys provide and also tools that you guys were all mentioning. So we can follow up and share all that stuff. But I want to thank everyone again. Thanks so much for being here. And this concludes our third day of Apps Without Code Live. Tomorrow we have a ton of marketing stuff going on. So the first day was on business model and bootstrapping. The last 2 days were on building apps and products, and tomorrow is on marketing. So we will see you all here tomorrow. Thank you so much to the panel. Have a really good evening, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks, everyone.